Hi again, everybody. Welcome to Trials to Triumph. I'm Pastor Brad Closter, and I thank you for joining me. I hope that every single time we get together, you are not only able to join in on this, but it's an encouragement to you. And that I'm not just doing this and sending it over the airways for nobody, but I'm believing that your life somehow in some way is simply encouraged or strengthened by these short little times that we have together. So we have been talking about potential, and I hope that these are helping you see your own potential and what God wants to do on the inside of you. And not only your own potential, but help others find their potential as well. Hey, today I want to read to you a very famous section of verses out of the book of Jeremiah. And Jeremiah was called by God, and he was chosen. And I want to give you this verse to help you understand the significance of the calling that was on Jeremiah's life. So now Jeremiah was called by God to be a prophet. Not everybody in the world is called to be a prophet. So when I read you the verse, you don't have to think, well, oh, good. Now, well, I guess I'm called to be a prophet. No, not everybody's called to be a prophet. But so that part of the verse was specific to Jeremiah. But the rest of the verse was for him, was for you, was for me. Let's talk about it. Jeremiah chapter 1 and verse 5. Jeremiah 1:5 says, this is God speaking, before I formed you in the womb, not while I formed you in the womb, before I formed you in the womb. Now that's hard for our human brain to think about because our human brain can't really compute that, but God can. So before we were even being developed or created inside our mother's womb, God said, I knew you. In other words, before we even existed, God knew us. That's hard to believe, hard to imagine, but that's God for you. He said, before you were formed in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. Okay? Or, excuse me, another word for sanctified would be, another way to say that would be like set apart or separated you for use. I ordained you as a prophet to the nations. So again, like I said, not all of us are going to be a prophet to the nations. So that part of the verse we don't need to take personally, but the rest of it we do. So here's what God's saying to you. I don't know what your name is. I don't know where you live. I don't know who you are. I don't have to know all of that. All I know, this is what God says to you. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. So we could stop right there and see that God had a significant plan and a purpose for each one of us before we even knew what that plan and purpose was. See, God is not surprised by your life. We maybe are surprised by our life, but God is not. Now, I want to read you something that I wrote down. I don't want to misquote it or try to say it off memory, but I want to just read it how I wrote it. I said, God sees potential in people because he can see what he originally intended them to be. In this case, God originally intended Jeremiah to be a prophet. So therefore, every moment of Jeremiah's life, even when he was a baby, I don't know if they had high chairs back then, but even when he was a baby sitting in his high chair, eating his manna, whatever, God saw Jeremiah the baby, but he saw Jeremiah the prophet. So it's not hard for God to see potential in humans because he knows from the beginning what that human was supposed to do and be. But people have trouble seeing potential because they only see where they currently are instead of seeing where they could be. It's very difficult for humans It's been different for humans forever to see potential because we see what's right in front of our face. Like a few weeks ago, we talked about looking at the things that are temporary instead of the things that are eternal. The challenge for you and I is not to see where we currently are, but see where we could be. And in order to see what we could be, we have to have an understanding of what God called us to be. Because in Jeremiah's case, God said, I knew you, and I formed you, and I sanctified you before you were even born to be a prophet to the nations. So as Jeremiah is growing up, God said, I already know this is for you. You're going to be a prophet to the nations. You're going to speak for me. You're going to do all these things. So Jeremiah's opinion eventually of himself eventually had to match the opinion of God for them to be able to work together. Because if if God said, Jeremiah, you're a prophet, but Jeremiah said, Jeremiah, you are a pizza delivery man, then their opinions, their plan would never have meshed. So at some point, this is where potential comes in. At some point, you and I have to find out from God, what is it that you have for me? I want to see, God, what you see about me. May that be our prayer tonight. God, I want to see what you see in me. Because when you begin to see that, your vision for yourself and God's vision of yourself can start to come together, and it can start to create something great. Hey, I hope that was helpful for you tonight. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you again next time on our Trials to Triumph.